Outrage from opposition parties in El Salvador as the president sends troops into parliament. An electoral revolution in Ireland as Sinn Féin takes the lead in the general election. And protesters in Britain call on the Prime Minister to halt the deportation of 50 people to Jamaica. Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Doris Polo in Quito, and this is From the South. We begin in El Salvador, where President Nayib Bukele sent soldiers into parliament on Sunday as he demands that lawmakers approve a loan to boost security. Despite the military presence, only 28 members of the parliament turned up to Sunday's extraordinary session, meaning it was again without a quorum to vote on the $109 million loan. Members from the left-wing FMLN and the right-wing Arena parties refused to attend. Bukele said he would give the parliament one more week to pass the legislation.
If these scoundrels don't approve this week the territorial control plan, then we will return here on Sunday. We ask God again for wisdom, and we say, God, you asked me for patience, but these scoundrels don't want to work for the people.
And the left-wing FMLN political party says the government sent security forces to the homes of its lawmakers and those of Arena to threaten them and try to force them to attend the session of Parliament.
If, by making illegal use of state institutions, our people continue to be persecuted, our lawmakers and their families simply, we are making you responsible for this. You can't play with this. If you think confrontation and could be safe, we only bring collateral damage to one side. You are wrong. You are wrong.
Our correspondent, Ernesto Avalos, has more from San Salvador.
Sunday was a very intense day here in El Salvador. The FMLN was holding its national convention in the morning, where the Secretary-General, Oscar Ortiz, made it clear that the FMLN rejected the call by President Nayib Bukele for an extraordinary session of Parliament to approve the $109 million loan for his security plan. He said he gave full support to the party's lawmakers not to attend, since the Legislative Assembly was holding regular sessions where this plan could perfectly well be discussed. The extraordinary session was called for 3 p.m. on Sunday. The president arrived an hour later and spoke to his supporters outside the Assembly. There he used strong words to accuse the FMLN and Arena lawmakers of being linked to gangs known as pandillas, and claimed that these gangs may have received money from these parties during elections. After speaking for half an hour, the president went into the Legislative Assembly and made a prayer to God, where he said he had asked for patience and more patience to avoid getting into a conflict between the legislature and the executive. He said he would give the members of the parliament another week to approve this loan, and he said if they didn't do that, next Sunday he would return to the Assembly. He also called on the population to punish these lawmakers of El Salvador's two traditional parties in next year's legislative elections and remove them from office.
Thank you, Ernesto, for that report. A revolution in the ballot box. That is how leader of Sinn Féin described the unprecedented success of her nationalist party in Saturday's general election. The first results on Sunday night gave Sinn Féin the largest number of first preference votes with 24.5%. For the first time, they beat the two traditional parties that have alternated in power for decades. Fianna Fáil had 22% and the governing Fine Gael or Gael had 21%. Ireland's single transferable voting system means Fianna Fáil is still predicted to win the most number of seats in Parliament, and difficult coalition talks are expected.
This is not a protest vote. This is certainly an election that is historic in proportions. This is changing the shape and the mould of Irish politics. This is not a transient thing, this is just the beginning. The best outcome is a government without Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, so that's the first thing that I want to test, whether or not that is possible. I also have consistently said that I will talk to and listen to everybody. I think that's what grown-ups do. I think that's what democracy demands.
Moving to Latin America, Bolivia's Supreme Electoral Court is putting obstacles in the way of some of the main candidates from the movement towards socialism for the May elections. They include the MAS presidential candidate Luis Arce and the former president Evo Morales. The court has given them 3 days to provide allegedly missing documents to approve their nominations. The requirements include evidence that they are not involved in any criminal case, have served in the military, speak 2 languages, and are permanent residents of the country. At the weekend, thousands gathered in Sacaba in Bolivia's Chapare region for the official launch of the presidential campaign of the Movement Towards Socialism Party. Youth unions, along with campesino and indigenous movements, joined the presidential ticket of Luis Arce and David Choquehuanca for the festive event. Throughout the weekend, citizens have also been calling for an end to political persecution of mass leaders by the de facto authorities. Now, during the rally, the candidates called on all Bolivians to participate in the May 3rd general elections, which will come a mere 6 months after the military-backed coup that ousted President Evo Morales.
It has been more than 500 years of lies, and we have decided to return to the truth. Our political instrument will bring us back to the path of the truth.
We have our correspondent Camila Escalante in Sacaba with this report.
Thousands are gathered here today at the Municipal Stadium of Sacaba to launch the Luis Arce David Choquehuanca ticket for the presidency, for the movement towards socialism, and the rest of the MAS candidates. This is a huge stronghold for the movement. The stadium is absolutely packed, and there were thousands of people from social movements waiting to get in. The event is just about wrapping up, but today's program began with a moment of silence for the martyrs, as they're referred to, who were killed in the November 15th Sacaba massacre. They were killed in a police and military operation not far from here. They're remembered for having given their lives in the struggle to return democracy and Bolivia's process of change, which was interrupted by the coup. It's clear that the bases here have come together to rally around the Arce Choquehuanca duo, despite rumors of tension within the ranks of the movements. People here say that they're going to be mobilizing support for the next 3 months to ensure that the right-wing parties and alliances don't get into office, despite fears that the election is already being organized under climate political persecution against leaders of the MAS. Festive day with candidates dancing and performances on stage, and we were able to hear from President Evo Morales as well as the candidates. President Evo Morales and the candidates made sure to urge the people not to react to provocation by the right wing with violence. That's all from the Municipal Stadium of Sacaba.
Thank you, Camila. That was Camila Escalante in Bolivia's Sacaba region at the launch of the presidential election campaign for the MAS party. Now, speaking of elections, 2020 is a year of elections in the Dominican Republic, beginning with the local elections next weekend. These will be an indicator ahead of the presidential election in May.
Just a week to go, and the Dominican Republic is getting ready for its municipal elections.
There is no more important day than Election Day, because people know that is when all citizens are equal, and that sense of equality needs to be protected.
More than 64,000 electoral military police will be on duty. The Electoral Board is getting the voting centers and the ballots ready for the local elections of the 16th of February. So what is the political outlook?
These municipal elections are complicated because in the capital the race is very close. The two main parties, the PLD and the PRM, are neck and neck in the polls for mayor. In the case of Santiago, which is a very important province, the PLD candidate, Abel Martinez, does have a clear lead.
Automated voting will take place alongside manual votes. 18 municipalities with their 58 districts will use the automatic system, while the other 140 municipalities with 178 districts will be manual.
The Dominican Republic is one of the few countries in Latin America where there has been no rupture in political class. The traditional party system remains intact, even though it's discredited and has lost people's trust.
Mayors and local councillors will be elected in 32 provinces, 158 municipalities, and 235 districts. In all, 3,849 posts are up for elections by nearly 7.5 million voters at over 16,000 polling stations.
The people will vote for those who can give them something, not public service, not big ideas or a vision of society, but some direct help to help them survive, which is what people expect, and which is the legacy of this neoliberal system in which we are living in the Dominican Republic.
There has been a campaign against the selling of votes under the slogan, "If you sell your vote, we all lose." The results of these elections will be a test of what is to come in the presidential elections in May.
Coming up, we speak to a UK expert on the impending deportation of 50 people to Jamaica. Join us for that and more in a minute.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis, and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en I.
Dot in the I. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. More than 170 British members of Parliament have urged Prime Minister Boris Johnson to hold plans to deport 50 people to Jamaica on Tuesday. This comes a few days after protesters held late-night demonstrations at Downing Street, calling on the government to stop its plans to charter a flight to send dozens of people to an unfamiliar country. It's linked to the Windrush scandal, as a recently leaked report said the government should consider ending the deportation of foreign-born offenders who came to the UK as children. So for more on these developments, we're joined by human rights activist Lee Jasper, who was the first black deputy mayor of London between 2004 and 2008. He's now representing the Windrush Action for Justice organization. Lee, thank you so much for joining us just a day ahead of what is expected to be a very unfortunate development.
Yes, I'm actually representing Black Lawyers for Justice rather than the Windrush Action Group. But it is a tremendously sad day as we expect the forced deportation of many people who denied really due process and proper access to legal representation. Many of the people on this plane are deemed not to be British on the basis that their parents failed to apply for British citizenship. Well, we all know because of the ensuing Windrush scandal that their parents were denied their right to access citizenship. So it was fallacious and a monumental injustice that their children should now find themselves, many of whom have committed crimes years and years ago. There's one person on the plane whose crime was committed over 17 years ago, and yet he's still being deported. So I think the British government disingenuity in relation to describing the people as serious criminals has to be exposed. It's a very sad day for us all.
Now, Lee, the government has defended the move. Let's take a listen to Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who stood by the deportation scheduled for tomorrow.
Mr. Speaker, I think the whole House will understand that the people of this country will think it right to send back foreign national offenders.
Now, it is a very short but telling soundbite. What are your thoughts on that, especially since 170 MPs signed a letter to the Prime Minister saying they have grave concerns and they're asking him to stop the flight?
There's huge outrage here in the United Kingdom. And the reality is that over 61% of those designated ready for deportation by this government in 2018 were successfully challenged in the courts and deemed by the courts not to be illegal citizens. So the track record of this government and Boris Johnson in detaining and deportating people and getting that right is appalling. 61% failure rate, and therefore he can't be trusted. We don't trust him, and certainly what people abroad have to appreciate, although they think that Britain is the land of law and democracy, that institutionalized racism, particularly in the last few years, has become absolutely rampant, and racial inequality and racial injustice abound. We can have no confidence in a government who can't get it right for the majority of deportation decisions to get it right for those 50 deportees destined on this flight.
So Windrush movements, they have been getting, or you all have been getting support from Labour MPs, the likes of David Lammy, Diane Abbott. What would you say about this type of support you've been getting? Would you say that this is going to sway the government in any way at all?
I think we're deeply grateful for the kind of support that we are getting. We're getting support from all parties, not just the Labour Party, but certainly from the Labour Party. And it's an indication, really, of the shock and horror that is being felt as families are being ripped from their fathers and mothers. People with mental ill health are being detained. We've had 2 attempted suicides while we wait for this deportation plane. And as the clock ticks down to tomorrow, we're calling on the Jamaican government in particular to deny the British plane the ability and the right to land, because there can be no confidence in this government's ability to get these decisions right. They've been guilty of racism in the past. They're guilty of racism in relation to this flight. Windrush demonstrates that. Their acute failure rate demonstrates that. I can't see how any government of good conscience could willingly accept the word of a prime minister who's presided over governments that have delivered the Windrush scandal.
As you've mentioned that, it brings me to this point, because Theresa May, when the Windrush scandal erupted 2 years ago, she said that she was going to suspend flights to the Caribbean as a result, and then that restarted. And then this is also in stark contrast to the UK ending deportations to Australia some 150 years ago. So do you think that there's a double standard there?
Absolutely. We've got the famous comedian Rolf Harris, an Australian, very high repute, sang the world-famous tune that Tied My Kangaroo Down, guilty of serious paedophilia offences here in the United Kingdom. He's not being deported to Australia. We've just had a Asian young man born abroad, released from jail, committed terrorist attacks on the streets of Breton in South London. He wasn't subject to deportation. Why is this seemingly specially reserved for black people and people from Africa and the Caribbean? So you're right, there is a double standard. And that's my appeal to the general Caribbean and African nations out there. Please see beyond the hype and the propaganda of this government. The reality is that we are here as black British people being subject to the most horrendous and egregious infringements of our human rights.
So with just 24 hours to go before 50 people are expected to go back to Jamaica, one of whom was said to have come to the UK at the age of 5. What type of legal action could we potentially see taking place?
Well, there's 2 types of action. We're seeing legal action and a judicial review in the High Court being lodged now, We hope to get an oral hearing in front of a judge this afternoon. If we are successful, then that could ground the flight, but we're still waiting to get access to a judge in order to have that hearing. The second type of action is there is a mass picket of 10 Downing Street taking place in the next couple of hours, where we can expect hundreds, if not thousands of people to turn out, even though it's windy, it's rain, it's cold right now in London. I think that many people will turn up, halt traffic in a non-violent civil disobedience protest to drive this point home. We really stop the plane. You know, the government ordered a Windrush review, a lessons learned review. They haven't published that report. A leaked copy said that nobody on that plane who arrived as a child should be deported. There are at least 9 people on that plane that we know fit that description. And there are other people who are equally should not be on the plane according to British legal definitions. Is this driving through a culture and horses, through our human rights, that has given rise to these mass illegal deportations?
Thank you so much, Lee, for joining us. Lee Jasper from the United Kingdom, giving us really an update on what is taking place as 50 people are expected to be deported to Jamaica tomorrow. Thank you so much, Lee.
Thank you.
When we come back, the latest on China's coronavirus epidemic, so don't go away.
Innovation, science, the technological breakthrough, and its influence in society.
Viajeros del saber, el futuro está aquí.
Atomen. Monday, only on Telesur.
The death toll from the new coronavirus has risen to 908 in mainland China as millions of people start returning to work after an extended holiday designed to slow the spread of the virus. The National Health Commission said 97 people died on Sunday, making it the deadliest day since the outbreak started. The number of confirmed cases nationwide now stands at 40,171. The outbreak has turned most cities into ghost towns, with most people staying indoors. But on Monday, traffic returned to the streets as millions made their way to work.
Currently, there are 35,982 confirmed cases, among which 6,484 are severe cases. There are altogether 3,281 cured cases and 90 deaths. The cumulative number of confirmed cases is 40,171. There are now 23,589 suspect cases, and we have traced 399,487 close contacts.
Shifting gears now, Israeli planes have carried out airstrikes on the besieged Gaza Strip, causing extensive damage, local media has reported. The Israeli military claimed that the airstrikes were a response to a rocket that was allegedly fired at Israel from Gaza on Sunday. There are no reports of any casualties so far. The incident comes amid tensions in the region, in the wake of U.S. President Donald Trump's presentation of the so-called Middle East peace plan. South African opposition leader Julius Malema has said his party will not support calls by other opposition parties to pass a vote of no confidence against President Cyril Ramaphosa.
We will not support ATM motion of no confidence. We don't want clownish things here. I mean, the ATM didn't even speak to us. So when we did the motions of no confidence ourselves against other people before, we speak to everyone. when you know your strength, you can't just wake up in the morning and say you're going to pass a motion of no confidence. You don't talk to people and then just assume they will support you. No, it doesn't work like that. There is no motion of no confidence we're going to support. We're going to fight Cyril our own way, and we're not going to be hijacked by any opportunism, any corrupt elements, nothing. We'll hold Cyril accountable, and we'll do it our own way. And there's no one who's going to blackmail us.
The 33rd African Union Summit, which opened on Sunday in Ethiopia, has concluded with a call for African solutions for African problems. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, who is taking over from Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi as chairperson of the continental body, said the AU must take a proactive role in resolving conflicts across the continent. He accused the international community of sidelining Africa from initiatives aimed at ending the conflict in Libya. And we end with news that the South Korean film Parasite has made history by becoming the first non-English language film to win an Oscar for Best Picture at the 92nd Academy Awards. Directed by Bong Joon-ho, Parasite tackles classism and beat heavy competition, including the war epic 1917, to take home its 4th statuette of the night. The film also won the awards for Best Director, Best International Feature and Best Original Screenplay, becoming the big winner on Hollywood's biggest night. Parasite had a total of 6 Academy Awards nominations. Congratulations to Bong Joon-ho and the entire cast of Parasite. And that brings us to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, remember you can find us on Starsat Channel 461 in South Africa and Channel 539 in Nigeria. And join us on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.